Shall we? All right, we're live. I believe this is the last session of the day. Is that right, Ulysses? I apologize. I can't stand in one place up on the stage, so I'm going to walk around a little bit for the few minutes that I have. First question in here, who is not Smartronix or Collins? Right? Who's here to truly understand? None of you Smartronix folks raise your hand. Who's here to understand PLM and cloud? Right? You're the folks that we really want to gear towards today. Nothing against our friends from Smartronix who are doing this, but want to try to get to that. So since the crowd is small, you guys are obviously welcome to move up if you want, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A through here. Got a couple folks that are going to run right straight to the airport, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am Mark Fox. I'm just going to do the introductions here, a little bit of background on GovCloud, some PLM pieces. I don't think I'm going to have any surprises in there. And then we're going to jump in and let the customers and partners here from Collins and from Smartronix jump into the topic at hand. So first piece here, by way of background, again, I know a lot of the folks in here. I'm a gray beard at AWS Public Sector. Been here, Rob was asking, about 8.5 years now. But the interesting part is the two of us here that are kind of working this project within AWS, myself and Ulysses as well, also have, I've got about 6 years in the PLM space. Ulysses has got more than I have, so we actually know how to spell PLM and get into the argument over is it PLM versus PDM. So we've been in the industry and understand that before. The big piece that's up here, you guys can read through the bullets as best I can. Is there anybody here that needs an understanding and explanation of what PLM is and the challenge here? Right, so I'm not going to read a slide to you guys going through it. The other ones will get deeper into it. Obviously the big part up here is the part that is going to go across multiple disciplines within an organization, whether it's a government agency or if it's a commercial entity. PLM is one of those handful of large enterprise applications that is big capital E enterprise that touches all parts of an organization, lots of different data, and is just an ideal candidate to operate and run in a cloud environment. So what are we seeing here in the regulated industries? Again, not going to read the bullets, but the ones here to me that jump out the biggest are obviously the last two bullets that are in here. Folks that I've dealt with, whether they are a .mil entity or, again, my background's on the Navy side, think of the large shipbuilders, airframe manufacturers and others, are all looking to save money, and that's great. There's typically three things that will come up in conversation anytime we're talking about cloud. It's, hey, Mark, Ulysses, can you guys come in here and talk to me about cloud because I need to save money. I've got budgetary issues. And I'm happy to come in and use that as the reason to come in and have a discussion. The second piece is I need to be faster and more agile. And generally the customers or prospects believe that. They want to move to a DevOps agile environment. And then there's the third piece, which is the but. I'm really concerned and I don't quite understand the security part of it. We'll get into a little bit of that today, what a real customer has gone through. But as we go through that journey, we're looking for that customer to get to the point to where I know I called you in here to talk about money, but now I've realized after my initial education and maybe some piloting efforts that I have an opportunity to operate way more secure than what I had done in the past for a PLM environment. I've proved that I can go fast to be more agile, and I might even save some money along the way. So that's indicative of a mature customer who's got an understanding of what the cloud offers when we get them there. And again, obviously the big piece here from cloud on the money side of it is I'm either going to go out and acquire the hardware, write it off over the next 3 to 5 years that gives me this much defined capacity, and at times you're going to run into that wall where that equipment is either too old, it doesn't perform, or it doesn't have the horsepower that I want, where cloud you've got that virtually unlimited ability to expand and contract and pay only for what you use in this environment. So let's talk about the environment that we offer for these regulated industries. Our GovCloud region, the assumption is over the course of the last couple days, you guys have had lots of AWS. What is AWS? Where is AWS? What is the cloud? And this construct of our unit of cloud, and one of the things I'll tell folks is there's no such thing as the cloud. We use that terminology a lot, but our unit of cloud is a region. The region that we offer up for these highly regulated industries is our GovCloud region. And I think that's Keith Brooks in the back, right? Keith is really Mr. GovCloud for us, and Ulysses works for him. But what is GovCloud and how is it different than our other, what we refer to as our commercial regions? Again, the biggest part of it is It's the one that has been approved, and if we've got defense folks in here or civilian agency folks, for things that are up to impact level 4 and 5, FedRAMP High for the folks on the civilian side. And really it was initially built and created because of ITAR requirements. And there are folks in here that don't understand what ITAR is. Happy to have a side discussion. But the big part of it for ITAR that made GovCloud different than the others is the requirement going back 6, 7 years ago that the people that physically access that region for us that run it, and more importantly, those people that logically access and operate it remotely, they all had to be US persons. It's a designation. In fact, we've gone beyond that because of the desires of our defense customers, and we've been able to look at that and actually upgrade that to US citizens that operate that for us. So that's a big part of it, which is a driver and necessary to get some of these compliance regime that we have to be in GovCloud. Whether that's for ITAR we hit, for FedRAMP moderate and high, CGIS for the folks that are working in law enforcement, and the other pieces down here for the civilian and defense agencies. Any questions on this piece here from what and how GovCloud is different than the other regions? So we're going to go ahead and hand off. That's my piece. That's all you get of me today. Hand this off to our folks from industry. We've got Collins Aerospace. Mark, I believe you're up first.
Yep.
As we're going to go from there.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Ehrenberger. I'm a senior manager with our digital technology organization at Collins Aerospace. I've been working in the PLM arena for about 20 years, and give you a bit of overview on our company, and we'll work together to talk about our journey to cloud for our PLM. Just a little bit about Collins Aerospace. Collins Aerospace is actually a fairly new company. We are a unit of United Technologies and a product of a recent merger between UTC Aerospace and Rockwell Collins. So actually myself, Doug, and Dan, we all come from the Rockwell Collins side of that merger. That happened in late 2018. So that certainly expanded our portfolio of expertise in the aerospace and defense industry, and really expanded our portfolio. Little overview of just statistics or by the numbers. So Collins Aerospace has over 70,000 employees. Over 16,000 of those employees are in the engineering workforce and spread out over nearly 300 sites globally. Our annual revenue is $23 billion in sales, and our annual R&D investment is $2.5 billion, and that's both internally funded and customer funded. Our portfolio in the A&D industry is divided between military and commercial, 75% commercial, 25% military, and of that, a majority of that is new manufacturing, new product development, and the remainder 40% is aftermarket. Collins Aerospace is comprised of 6 different business units. Aerostructures, which is out of our Chula Vista, California facility, works on the housings for engines. Mechanical systems works on the landing gear. They're out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Avionics and mission systems, those are both headquartered in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and those 2 business units primarily comprise the footprint of the former Rockwell Collins. So those 2 business units are primarily what our application supports as part of the Collins Aerospace portfolio. Interior systems out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and then power and controls out of Windsor Locks, Connecticut. All right, so for our mission systems and avionics business unit, we utilize the Innovia 3D Experience 2016X PLM environment. And we recently completed an upgrade project to go from an earlier version of Dassault to 2016X. And as part of that upgrade project, we hosted the application on Amazon GovCloud. As I mentioned, That supports our mission systems and avionics business. And we currently have over 14,000 active users. And primarily those users are comprised of engineering operations, and they're located throughout many domestic sites in the US as well as international, like Mexico, UK, France, Germany, and India. Our application obviously is a critical system across our business. It manages the formal configuration of our engineering data, our part numbers, our bill of materials, and our specs and drawings. So obviously very important that the system is robust, it is secure, and it is available across multiple time zones across the globe. So that was a key consideration as we implemented our upgrade and making sure that we had optimal performance and availability to our customers. Obviously, if we're down, the factory can't pull drawings, can't produce, and engineering can't release their drawings into our environment. It manages the engineering change workflow, the introduction of new parts into our environment, as well as the change process. We do have direct integrations to some of our key engineering, mechanical, and electrical design tools like NX, Mentor, and Zuken. Also, we have a direct integration, two-way integration between our ERP system, which is SAP. So when the engineering data reaches that release point, we do transfer the information directly into SAP, where it gets translated into manufacturing data and supports the shop floor, procurement, and other functions downstream from engineering. And we also have a more lightweight application used for what we call our end users, or those users that are not heavily in our application, where you can go in, you can query for a part number, look at the metadata, and also access drawings that you're entitled to as part of that information. Okay, so we'll turn it over to Doug to talk about the purpose of our upgrade project and why we kind of focused on going to Amazon GovCloud.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm Doug Klosterman. I'm one of the enterprise architects at Collins Aerospace. So if you think about Mark and Dan really bring the expertise in the PLM space, I'm one of the folks who comes more from the AWS or from the cloud space. So I was sort of instrumental in a number of the different early use cases that we did in cloud. And so we sort of brought our two teams together, kind of brought the cloud expertise with sort of the deep expertise in the PLM platform. So this first slide kind of covers why we elected to do the upgrade. I think this is probably a story that will resonate with lots of folks in the audience. So we had our existing platform, like Mark mentioned. It was on an earlier version of the Dassault platform. And I would say as the business requirements evolved, we had more and more difficulty sort of meeting those new emerging business requirements. And those sort of span the spectrum of some examples that I would give would be, the slide talks about expanding user population. Another example would be as our designs grew in size, we had problems with scalability in terms of our on-prem infrastructure, had difficulty handling those larger design sets. Additionally, the business, Mark mentioned, it's very critical for the application to be available because it impacts our ability to do changes, to do manufacturing. And so the business was pushing us to do tighter and tighter business continuity in terms of recovery point objective and recovery time objectives. And if you looked at our existing platform, I would say we were in a more traditional, people call it disaster recovery, where we were recovering over a period of days, and the information that we would recover would be a period of hours old. And that was a demand from the business. They wanted the application to be more available in the event that we had an impacting event, and just to improve the overall availability of the application. We also talked about GovCloud as a place for ER/ITAR data, of course, based on sort of the military pieces of our business. That was definitely a need for us. We are a heavily regulated industry, and so when we would look to cloud, GovCloud was a natural fit for us. In terms of the government contract, there were the cybersecurity requirements, but the other thing we were really looking to do as the business requirements evolved, I would say our security requirements were evolving as well. So if you think about our desire on our security organization to improve the security of the platform in a number of different areas, one of those was around segmentation would be an example of that in terms of separating the different components of the application. Think about encryption at various points, both in transit and at rest, and then looking at inspection of the traffic in terms of making sure that malicious things weren't happening sort of throughout the platform. So as we were upgrading the version of the application, we were also looking at sort of raising the bar in those areas around elasticity, in terms of security, in terms of continuity. So this slide really talks about the upgrade planning process. As Mark mentioned, this is an application that was really critical for us. And so we really needed to do a very well thought out plan in terms of upgrading. At this point, I would say we had done a few different use cases in the cloud, but this was one of our first really mission critical application, things that we used to run our business. And so we really looked at one of the things we try to do, we try to have a cloud first mentality. And so we evaluate cloud with a lot of different business use cases, but this is certainly one that I would say, as we talked about cloud, we had a number of different discussions internally about, was this really a good use case for it? And so we put together a cross-functional team from different parts of the business, from different areas of the globe, and put together a really solid set of requirements in terms of what we were looking for. And then we did a comparison of, is cloud better for that, or is it better to sort of continue building it in our existing sort of on-prem model? And as we did the analysis there, cloud really came out ahead, and it was a pretty compelling story for us. As I mentioned, or as Mark mentioned, the two business units that this services are located, are global locations, but they're both headquartered in Cedar Rapids. And so the earlier version of the application, we located it in Cedar Rapids because a lot of the engineers are located there. And so one of the things that there was additional focus on with our move to the cloud, which I think will resonate, is around performance. Our leaders looked at, will the application perform? Of course, we have people spread all over the place, but we're moving the infrastructure away from being sort of very close to a large portion of our user population. As we move it further away, how will it perform in those conditions? And so one of the things that we did, which I think is kind of unique, is as part of just sort of answering the bell in those areas, we built a proof of concept environment before we chose cloud. And so we essentially built a copy of the application. We have an internal tool that we use to do load testing. And so essentially we can take some of the different user transactions like login, querying, different things like that, and we can essentially run those transactions and record performance from a user perspective. And so we essentially took our existing on-prem environment and we took a kind of a proof of concept out-of-box environment that we built in the cloud, and we executed those transactions against both of those two different environments, and we're very happy with what we saw in terms of performance. So that was a thing that was very helpful for us. We also, Mark talked about leveraging sort of in-house expertise. As you can tell from how Mark described himself, we have a lot of expertise in the Innovia platform. We have a really solid team around that. And then, like I said, from my perspective, the group that I work in, the architecture group, really brings a lot of the cloud expertise. And so we tried to bring those two things together to look at, we coordinated very closely with our vendor in terms of what the design was going to look like, in terms of sizing of the various components, how we stacked the pieces of the application in terms of EC2 instances. We talked about, for example, a specific example that I would give would be for the database, because there's a database in the main infrastructure elements. Do we want to put that database on EC2, or do we want to use Amazon's RDS? Which database engine do we want to use? Do we want to do what version of the database? Those kinds of conversations. I think one of the things that we did is we tried to work very closely with the vendor and bring sort of our own internal cloud expertise to that, and really have a pretty solid design. Then, as part of the upgrade process, we went through multiple rounds of both functional and performance testing as we put sort of real data into the application, made sure that our users were happy with it. We did regular meetings with our executive stakeholders, our executive leaders. And then, of course, there was a no-go decision sort of at the end of that process where we said, okay, I think we're ready. Does everybody around the room agree that we're ready to go live on this platform? And of course, we did. So then the next two slides really go through our logical architecture. This is sort of a kind of a high-level picture of the ecosystem overall. It's got the different sites in it. The piece up in blue is really sort of the AWS cloud component. And the next slide really goes into that in more detail. And so there's a couple of things that I want to say about this particular slide. One of the things, I mentioned that we worked very closely with the vendor and we're very transparent with them about our desire to put this in cloud. And one of the things we liked about this use case is this particular application, there were elements of the application where it tolerated things had to be close to the users and places where distance was perfectly acceptable. And in this case, this application has something called a file collaboration service, which are essentially like the drawings and the objects that the user interacts with. And so those needed to be close to the users. And you can see there's a number of different, the little square boxes are what we call our performance hubs. And so we essentially located those elements of the solution. We distributed them. You can see there's 6 of them in the 7 in the United States, and then there's 4 distributed internationally. And so we tried to bring those pieces of the solution close to the users, and then the main application components that you see up in the top left-hand corner, we were able to put those in cloud. And because of that sort of deliberate decision about where we put things, I think we got a very good performance experience. The other thing I wanted to mention about this slide is you can see the blue line basically going down to LA and Seattle. One of the early use cases that we did in AWS was a very heavy data use case. And so we established direct connects in a number of different places in the US and internationally. And so in terms of like sequencing use cases, I think one of the pieces of feedback I would give to someone else is think about the prerequisites that you have. Something like network connectivity is pretty foundational. And so depending on what your requirements are, you'll want to look at that and think about, okay, do I need, what kind of network connectivity do I need? And make sure that you sort of have that in place ahead of time. And like I said, with this, what we did is we sort of sequenced our use cases so that earlier use cases brought those things, they were done, and then this part of the design could basically just leverage that. So this slide goes into a little bit more of the physical architecture. I'm not going to talk to this in detail because I think this probably varies a little bit based on different use cases. But there's a couple things that I do think we want to say about this particular part of the architecture. One of the things I'll say is we have a goal at Collins where we try to leverage provider capabilities where we can. And so we deliberately always try to start from, is there a SaaS option for this particular capability? If there's not one, or if it doesn't meet our requirements, then we look at platform as a service. Then we look at infrastructure as a service. So there were places with this design where we were able to leverage capabilities that AWS brought to bear. Places like encryption of data at rest. They have a very good service in that space where you can bring keys or you can leverage the keys they provide. If you look at the database piece of this, you can see that we're using RDS for our design. I mentioned earlier that was one of the conversations that we had. And by leveraging AWS's RDS, we were able to do multi-AZ, and so essentially consume the database replication versus monitoring that and building that ourselves. Another space where there's 2 more spaces that I wanted to talk about here. One of them is around scalability. So as we looked at each of the different elements of the application, we looked at how that particular part of the application scaled. Could it scale horizontally, or did it need to scale vertically? I think that's a space where, as you look at your particular application, those are questions I think you want to ask yourselves. And where possible, we tried to scale horizontally because we could scale in smaller increments. But I think with most use cases, that's ideal state, but we want to make sure the application works and it performs. And so there were spaces here where we had to scale vertically, and the platform or the ecosystem, of course, supports that very well also. The other thing, in sort of a DevOps mindset here, we tried to automate this as much as we possibly could. And so we used automation pretty heavily in this platform, both at the infrastructure level and software from a configuration management. And that's something I think we saw a lot of benefits in terms of repeatability and standardization of our configurations. And I think that was a huge benefit to us. So I think that's the last slide that I had. And I think, Mark, you're going to take it over from here.
Yep. All right, so what are some of the key takeaways or lessons learned from our implementation project? So Doug mentioned that we had a very good partnership between our PLM vendor, Dassault, and our in-house expertise on infrastructure and Amazon. The vendor would come in based on the size of the application, the amount of data, and the breadth of our user base would help us or provide recommendations as far as sizing servers, memory, database. And then our internal expertise then would take that and apply that to our Amazon cloud environment. And as we proceeded on with implementation, did our incremental testing, found that there were some areas that needed adjusting. They were there together to make sure that, okay, yep, we can accommodate that adjustment and still realize that benefit in the application. Doug also mentioned the security segmentation. So allowing, really being able to define our communication paths. Rather than the wide open, we have proxies, we have the WAFs, so we have to understand what data is flowing between elements of the application, the core application itself, some of our other data like our CAD tools and SAP. We had to make sure that all of those data flows were identified. We had the firewalls set up and that those were open. Obviously, too, when we did some testing, we found out, hey, why can't we communicate between these 2 points? Okay, we had to work with our security to make sure that those firewalls were open. As well as sizing. We had to take a look at what are some of the larger data sets. For example, if you're transferring a large bill of material from our PLM application to SAP, can that communication path handle that? So we had to make sure that the sizing of those communication paths were adjusted accordingly. Ensure cloud infrastructure as a service, IaaS, is supported, primarily on a vendor perspective. So our vendor's typical support model is, hey, we find an issue, we open a support ticket. The vendor's R&D needs to be able to assess that issue, find out, being able to identify, okay, is that an issue with the core application software, or is it an issue stemming from our infrastructure environment? Being Amazon GovCloud, fairly new to the vendor, we had to work with them to show, basically there's a lot of similarities between hosting on-prem as far as influence to the actual application, and work with them to make sure that, yes, if we opened a ticket, they would service that ticket, and we could easily discern between, is it an application issue or is it an infrastructure issue? Early performance monitoring to guide sizing. So in our older version of Innovia, we had monitoring tools, Nagios and Eternity, that gave us that real-time visual picture of how our application was performing. Our servers up and running, is the network up, all of our dependent data feeds working properly. We made sure that as we rehosted this new environment, the new software, the new infrastructure in Amazon, that we also rehosted our monitoring. So as we proceeded through the project execution, we could see real time how the application was behaving. And if we ran into an issue, we could easily narrow down that trouble point and quickly resolve it, kind of stemming back to the need for a very good uptime for our application and resolving issues quickly to minimize the downtime for the business. So that was very good at go live because shortly after go live we had to make an adjustment to some of our server memory. And then also, as Doug mentioned, strong communication to senior leaders. So we really brought our leadership along the journey from early implementation. Doug talked about the proof of concept we did by performing a test with a pseudo environment in the cloud to see if the performance was comparable. They were very interested in the performance numbers that we could see. So we were able to compare the numbers between our current application and what we were seeing with our proof of concept in the cloud environment. And the fact that they were comparable, sometimes better, that gave our senior leadership some assurance that we were on the right path by going to a cloud implementation. And then they were with us along the way as we ran into bumps. They helped us resolve, and they're also there for the successes as well, obviously. So, okay. All right, and I will turn that over to Dan to talk about some of the resulting benefits of our implementation on Amazon.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Dan Montague. I was the technical lead for the project. Worked very closely with Doug in a lot of the nitty-gritty details of getting things solved, working with the vendor. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about is go through our key benefits that we realized from hosting our PLM software in AWS GovCloud. One of the things that first I want to really talk about is the experience we had at our go live that really had an impact on how the success of it went forward. When we went live with the platform, we had a situation where the users were getting logged off the system because of our scaling. Our auto-scaling events were not quite tuned like they needed to be. Also, we're looking at our performance monitoring. We were seeing that the physical memory limits were being hit on a lot of our application servers. So what we did is we quickly convened a quick technical session with Doug and his team and said, hey, let's take care of this quickly. So we modified the auto-scaling in a 24-hour period to set the auto-scaling schedule so it made sense for the user interaction, as well as increase the physical memory limits for each of the application servers. We had a short outage that evening, brought the system down, brought it back up with the new auto-scaling schedule and an increased physical memory, and everything stabilized. Immediately, users were seeing good user experience, and the memory capacity was nominalized based on what we expected. So that's an example of something that could never have been done on an on-prem system in such a short period of time. The next thing for enhanced recovery, going back to one of Doug's slides, he talked about the multiple availability zones. That creates a situation where we have almost automated failover all the time for those availability zones. Also, we're taking advantage of the additional regions, the East region and the West region, so that we can automate that failover to those regions in a nice automated manner to meet our DFARS requirements. As far as the next step in our roadmap, we're looking at elastic file storage. And in that particular case, we're looking at optimizing our cost in such a way that when people access files, we can say, okay, here are the more frequently accessed files. So this is where most of your cost is going to be, and so that we can actually move that cost where the files are not being accessed into a lower cost area, but still have that same accessibility. The platform is fully FedRAMP compliant based on the elements that we're using for the PLM system. So that was an incredible cost avoidance that we were able to experience. Same way with the DFARS requirements that we had on the system. We had a template that we worked with the DoD as well as our own process. And with that process, we identified 110 DFARS controls. Out of 110 of those deforest controls, we were able to satisfy 105 of those fully or partially just with the platform. Consistent user experience. Basically, you could see that with those performance hubs that Doug had talked about, we have a larger bandwidth capacity connection to AWS GovCloud from those performance hubs. And that enables a nice optimal experience for all the users, for especially the high file traffic. And so when we're able to extend out that to other regions or other parts of the country or other parts of the world, we'll have that same type of low latency connection. The ITAR and EAR requirements, obviously storage on the platform is ITAR and EAR compliant. We also were able to extend that and keep our application interface control and enforcement in place as well for users accessing the application itself. So that's something that we were able to do, that we wanted to keep that intact from that perspective. Just in summary, the upgrade itself was really a brand new platform. So we were going to either put it on-prem or taking advantage of AWS GovCloud. And at the time, GovCloud didn't exist. So we worked with Doug. At the timing, all the things were coming together. We were doing the defarge assessment. We were looking at ways to increase the security of our platform. And based on the actual mechanics of installing these tools on-prem versus GovCloud are almost identical. So it's pretty much a no-brainer. Hey, we need to just go ahead and go forward with AWS GovCloud and implement that platform to take advantage of all those features of the platform, as well as posturing ourselves for the future for optimization opportunities as well as new capabilities. So I'll hand it over to Rick.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Rick Kelly with Smartronix. I'm the Cloud Practice Director. I understand I'm the last speaker standing between you and the end of the day or the reception, so I'm going to be very brief and get us on track to get out of here on time. So Smartronix, a little bit about the company. We were founded in 1995, originally as a organization putting logic on embedded chips and controllers within smart devices. Today, that part of the organization is advanced. The next mission to Mars will have Smartronix components on it, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. Back shortly after the company was founded, we had a partner join the organization from Booz and decided that professional services and supporting DoD was the biggest opportunity in front of us. And over the last 24 years, we've developed a enterprise business systems management system, practice, enterprise systems architecture, and built out our cloud computing and cybersecurity capabilities. In 2009, we launched our cloud practice, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We focus greatly on helping organizations transform their workloads from a classic type implementation where you have it on instance-based infrastructure within your organizations, transferring that to the cloud, transforming it by taking advantage of cloud native and PaaS solutions or SaaS solutions as available. And then Smartronix has a full cloud managed service offering that we offer to our clients to be able to help them manage their workloads once they get to the cloud. This is primarily focused for heavily regulated industries, and that's because we grew up out of the public sector, building systems in highly regulated spaces. We were been a premier partner of Amazon since that designation came out 6 years ago. We were the inaugural partner for managed services, migration services, for big data, as well as DevOps competencies. We were the first organization to migrate a public sector organization to the cloud back in 2009 with the Recovery Board. We helped them take advantage of the Amazon platform to be able to hit their dates that were congressionally mandated to have the systems up and running. And we've successfully completed a 3PL audit and are in progress for our FedRAMP authorization for our managed services platform that I'll touch on briefly here. And then for the last 3 years, we've been tracked by Gartner in their Magic Quadrant, and you can see that we have a very prestigious feedback from them on where they see us for public sector managed services organizations worldwide. So you heard a little bit about what Collins has done as far as their implementation process, where they internally had the team and the ability to take their entire PLM application to the cloud and be able to deploy that, the full life cycle of getting sponsorship all the way through approval to do it. But what we want to talk about very briefly was there are a couple other options, and there's lots of deviations to those options. One is, and we've had a lot of organizations work with us, where the customer wants to do something similar to Collins, but they don't have all that internal cloud capability or regulatory compliance experience. So what they do is they come to us and they want to continue to grow their resources, build out their capabilities, but they ask us to bring in our team to help them build their strategy, set the governance in place, help them design the systems in a cloud optimized way, to be able to then help them work through those compliance levels. And so we'll augment their team and come in and help them build out that process, and then gradually, as they gain competency in the various areas they didn't have strength in before, we gradually step back. And then the other option that we have is we offer a MSP service. Essentially, you come to us, we set up everything for you. We have templated-based approach to do that. And then you focus on just managing the PLM workflows and the processes, who has access controls, and we manage everything behind that for you. We help you with the authorizations within the federal government if you need to get an ATO or work through the compliance models. All that is, non-differentiated heavy lifting, and we take care of that and let you focus on the mission. So a couple different options. When we do that, we focus on a small number of very critical things. One, the requirements. What are the regulations you're going to be operating under? We have to implement those first. The security best practices. We implement those from the beginning. Those aren't an afterthought. Everything needs to be automated. We've heard a lot about DevSecOps over the last couple days. It has to be part of building out your infrastructure so you have a mutable, well-protected infrastructure that you can recover to or deploy your test and dev environments in a repetitive fashion. And then the other thing that we bring that allows a lot of organizations to get their ATOs or approval to operate their systems quickly is we offer that managed services. You can inherit controls from AWS. You can inherit controls or through reciprocity take what's already been approved by the government and pick all that up from us all the way up through IL4 and soon IL5 so that you then can get accreditation much faster. It shortens that 10 months down to just a couple months to be able to get a system approved. And we know that because we've done it in a lot of different markets. We have IL4 systems that we do for the US Navy, for the Air Force, for the Army, and the Marine Corps. We've done this for the Department of Justice, for DOI, to mention a few. And then we do it extensively within the private sector for regulated industries, which include Siemens and others. And I'm running short here. So just real quick, we have a number of templated options. These are just examples of some of these topologies we've done. On this side, we have a very simplistic one that is used for development of personal hygiene products. And it's a very, very simple deployment that connects right into their environment. We manage that. The customer focuses on their business. And then another example for a large DoD contractor, it can be, and we've worked with large aircraft manufacturers, train companies, as well as military shipbuilders, very complex, where we have to bring all the DoD controls in and be able to manage all those and help them get their systems accredited. So I apologize for being so brief. We're short on time. I'm going to turn this back over to Mark to see if there's any questions.
Don't be bashful. Last chance today. Yes, sir.
So, you chose to implement the Innova PLM as an infrastructure as a service cloud solution. Was there a SaaS solution available, or is there one? Is there going to be one?
Yeah, we looked at, there is a SaaS option for it because of the regulations that we have and the processes that we have. As I mentioned, we typically try to look for, as we go to implement new things, SaaS is one of the first things that we consider. In this case, I think if you think about kind of what's stored in it and the regulatory requirements on those things, it wasn't viable in this particular case, but for another company, maybe it would be.
Yeah, and typically, as you'd expect on those companies, they're going to come out with a SaaS offering. They're going to pick, a commercial cloud provider, typically where they're going to host it, and generally they're going to come out in a commercial environment first, and then as there's a demand signal that's loud enough out there that says, Inova, that's great, but boy, could you push this over? Could you have an instantiation, in a government region in something like AWS GovCloud? And I know Keith is out, but Ulysses, I don't know that we've heard that demand signal coming from the PLM providers yet that say, hey, AWS GovCloud group, we would like to go ahead and host an Inova or any of the other big PLM players in an AWS GovCloud yet. I think we're getting close to that because there's a lot of regulated industry customers, some that Rick had alluded to, but at this point I don't think we have any SaaS offerings in ours or the other government commercial cloud providers regions as of yet. Anybody else got any commentary on that particular subject? I'm going to get Smartronix crowd and others here. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
For the Collins folks, can you share how many users were in your user base, as well as the time frame that it took for the migration to happen?
Yeah.
It's on the slide.
Yeah, I think I have.
You can just answer.
Yeah. About 14,000 overall users. Another thing that when we went to this new version, we also went to a named user license model. So a lot of our read-only users weren't necessarily counted, but now they are because they all have accounts. So yeah, I guess don't remember your second part of the question.
Time frame.
Oh, time frame. Thank you. I believe over the period of time, our upgrade project, I think we started the initial work back in late 2015, obviously. We went live a year ago, May of 2018 in the US, and that's the instance we have in Amazon GovCloud.
Any of the folks here that are here to really hear about PLM got some questions? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, well, let's keep it going.
One more. Any visions you can share about how so system engineering, the right side of the V would be like PLM, but any visions you can share about the left side of the V, say model-based system engineering?
I can take that.
Yeah, sure.
We're looking at model-based engineering tools, adding that to our platform. We just talked with No Magic. I think Dassault just bought that company. And it is a web-based tool, and it's all HTTPS capable. So that would be a logical next step to get us down our roadmap of model-based engineering requirements integration.
Yes, sir.
I'm curious, in working in GovCloud with the capabilities and features lagging the public cloud, Were there challenges in this project in developing in GovCloud? Was AWS clear about what services were available and what you were waiting for?
I wouldn't say that, I mean, there certainly are differences between what's available in Gov versus what's available in commercial. I do think that's an area based on conversations that we've had with Amazon that they're working to shorten that. But I do think for us, this was something that we knew this would be in GovCloud. And so from sort of the beginning when we did our design work, GovCloud was sort of kind of the bumpers that we put around the design process. I can't say that that was a huge sort of inhibitor for us, but like Dan mentioned, one of the areas that we're looking to adopt the EFS platform. So if you look at what we did from a file management piece of it, we did something where that was a space that we couldn't consume platform as a service. Now, because at the time that we did our deployment, EFS wasn't available in Gov, it was in commercial, and so we knew it was something that we would look to adopt. So we did sort of a short-term solution, and I think the EFS is now available, at least it is in West, and they're going through sort of the FedRAMP compliance process on that, and so that's on our roadmap. I think, again, that's one of the nice things about cloud. As the capabilities change and mature, we're able to pretty easily go adopt those. New EC2 instances is another space where historically you would be stuck on whatever the compute platform was when you did your deployment. And here, as we look at what the roadmap is, we can easily move over to whatever the next compute platform is.
Were there, just to drill into that, were there or are there still any services that you do see available in commercial region that you guys are saying beyond EFS, boy, it would be nice, we'd love to take advantage of it? So both to you or to you as well, are there services that you're aware of, maybe in something you're thinking that may not be in GovCloud today that you'd like to have to support a PLM implementation that would need to be in GovCloud? So for you guys, are there services out there that you're saying to Ulysses and Keith, can you get it in GovCloud, but we really could use it to support our PLM project?
Yeah, I guess I can give a quick example, and I think this is, there's an active dialogue on this one, but WAF was one of the things that wasn't available in Gov when we went live, and so we did something else for that piece of the solution, and now that it's available, you know, making things like that, security type services, I think is the space I would go.
Perfect. Anything in particular you were thinking of? Any services that?
I'm familiar with Microsoft Cloud, and a lot of the security features lag behind. I'm not familiar with AWS very much.
Yeah.
Certainly a security feature.
Yeah, and that's a, you know, piece that where that gap between release of a security feature, because a significant number of those security, you know, of services in general you put out are security direct or security indirectly related, and they'll hit the commercial regions first, and they get based upon a demand signal, they get pulled in. But that timeline between, that's something that we continue to chip away at and cut that delta down between commercial release and GovCloud release. And in fact, there are a lot of the services now are coming out in parallel in both commercial and GovCloud regions. So, other questions? Observations, questions from the Smartronix crowd? Anything else? Ulysses, anything? All right. Folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for, this is going to wrap it up. Thank you for attendance at the Public Sector Summit. We look forward to seeing you again next year for sure. And between now and then, feel free to reach out to us. And again, thank you for the business. Thank you for your attendance.